Home Affairs Minister Dr. Aaron Motsaoledi says a cabinet decision to end the Zimbabwean Exemption Permit will not be reversed. And this is despite tremendous pressure from both the Zimbabwean government and some lobby groups here in South Africa. The permits were given to about 250,000 Zimbabweans who are among millions that fled the political and economic crisis in their home country. And that was in 2008. Since then, the documented families have been able to live and work here in South Africa. They'll now have to apply for mainstream visas by December 2022. However, Advocate Simba Chitando, who's the legal counsel for the Zimbabwe Exemption Permit Holders Association, says his clients have been denied the right to regularize their stay. The advocate joins us now via our video link. And Advocate Chitando, it's great to have you on the program, sir. Thanks very much indeed for making time. Let's begin perhaps with much needed context around the story. What the Home Affairs Minister is contending, at least if yesterday's reports are anything to go by, is that these permits were always going to be temporary. What's your response to that?
Thank you for having me on your show. Greetings to your audience. The permits were initially intended to be temporary. That is a fact. The Home Affairs Minister is correct in saying that. But what we have seen, what actually happened is that the permits became permanent in nature by its application. We have had a situation where there have been several regimes, permit regimes, called different names, but the same thing with a different name, using the same provision of the Immigration Act. And the contention of the Zimbabwe Exemption Permit Holders Association is that these are now temporary. Well, they started off as temporary permits, but they've provided a right to permanent residency by the virtue of the fact that the individuals concerned have been in the country for more than a decade.
Sure. It's a difficult one to try and reconcile. So essentially you're saying that these permits became de facto permanent residency documents, for lack of a better term. I do wonder, though, from 2008 to when this announcement was made, what interaction, if any, has there been between your clients and the South African government about clearing out what the status of their being in this country actually looks like, given the very unique conditions under which they left Zimbabwe back in 2008?
Okay, very good question. There's no secret of the fact that there's been a lot of lobbying over the years, not just for this ZEP expiry, which comes to in effect on the 31st of December, but the previous regimes, the ZSP, DZP, there was always interaction with the Exemption Permit Holders Association. The leaders have pretty much been the same. There have been some changes, but there's always been interaction. Even this year there was interaction. And you mentioned earlier that there's been efforts made by our diplomatic team, or the country, the embassy has been making its own endeavors. So there's always been interaction at the highest levels.
And I presume that interaction has been met by a level of resistance from the South African government, if just inaction in its totality?
Well, until the decision on the 24th of November, there was no indication that there was hostility.
Sure.
Which is why the decision came as a shock to many Zimbabweans.
Right, right. Part of what's also being said in the charged exchange is that what is actually happening here is that some people who are now in this country, at least since 2008, want to stay in South Africa because they had fallen out of favor with the ZANU-PF-led government. In other words, there had been some kind of political fallout, and because of that, they want to remain in South Africa. How true is that?
Well, it's not true. What I would say, rather, is there are various reasons for people to be in South Africa. Some of them is just purely for economic reasons. South Africa is a bigger economy than Zimbabwe, and even when Zimbabwe thrives, South Africa would always be a bigger economy. It's got 5 times the population of Zimbabwe, so it's always going to be a bigger economy. There's always going to be that migration. But that said, there has been an economic situation in the country. Many believe it's been caused by economic sanctions, illegal economic sanctions put on Zimbabwe. Others believe it's because of the issues that you just mentioned. They're not happy with the Zimbabwean government, and they blame Zimbabwean government for that economic collapse. And if that's the case, so everyone, depending on which side of the political divide, to be fair, to be accurate, because everyone has got their own story. It could be the government's fault, or it could be the sanctions, it could be a combination of the two, it could simply be the fact that South Africa is a big economy.
The question then becomes, I guess, who needs to make up for whatever fault there was in the past? Because the thrust being made by the argument presented by the minister yesterday is that South Africa doesn't have this unending pool of resources to be able to essentially carry any country, not just Zimbabwe, in the event that those countries have economic and political crises. I guess this is the question around what happens in the long term, because even if this particular hurdle is solved, let's say in the next couple of weeks, I imagine the issue again will come up, and the question becomes, what will happen then?
That's a very good question. And my answer to that is South Africa is not an island. South Africa's economic growth will not take place, or growth, or even stability. My view is the decision by the South African government on the 24th of November will destabilize its own economy. You cannot uproot that number of people, that number of families, which we say are about 100, 200,000, but more millions of individuals from the economy, and expect the economy to remain stable. It won't. It will be severely impacted by that decision. That said, South Africa's future depends on a very good relationship with Zimbabwe. That is a hard reality for many people who have animus towards Zimbabweans, who have xenophobic sentiment towards Zimbabweans. They have to accept the fact that Zimbabweans buy South African goods and use South African services in exchange for the payment of money. And that relationship will be disturbed, and has been disturbed. And we're at the precipice at the moment, and I just hope that sane minds prevail, that the matter will be heard in court, and we are hopeful for a positive outcome.
Yeah. If things don't go your way, paint the picture for us about what that looks like, even practically speaking, for that many people having to leave the country. I mean, as you mentioned, the figures that we have is around 200,000 odd people who might be affected by this. I imagine there are other dependents who are involved within that figure in and of itself. I'm just trying to, I guess, place what their leaving this country might look like, and the impact even just logistically when you consider that.
Well, in one word, Armageddon. There's no other way in which one can practically look at this. It's Armageddon, Armageddon. We've seen this happen in other countries. We've seen it happen in Uganda, what happened to the Ugandan economy when a large number of Indian nationals were removed by former President Idi Amin. And it's shocking that I have to compare the South African government to Amin's government. It's sad, but that is the nearest comparison. It is a large number of individuals that you can't. I don't even think there's enough staff at Home Affairs to go out and remove all of these. I mean, it will require a operation of an industrial scale. You would have to literally employ thousands and thousands of people to remove, because I mean, if we are unsuccessful, I'm not sure that many ZEP holders will comply with unfavorable. I don't know. You know, I'm a lawyer. I advise clients to follow the law, but the reality on the ground is that many people go underground.
Sure.
Because the law doesn't assist them.
Right.
So it is Armageddon.
Let me ask this question very quickly, Advocate, if I can. I mean, the other alternative, of course, is that your clients could apply for these mainstream visas, and I understand that the deadline for that is December next year, December 2022, right? Which is next year, yes. Help us understand why that's not a viable alternative.
Well, it's not viable, it's an alternative. It's there. But the reality on the ground is that we already know that Home Affairs is undercapacitated. I mentioned that you'd have to hire thousands of Home Affairs staff, or VFS is being outsourced as a service provider in that regard. But even then, South Africa's the Home Affairs cannot handle the workload that it has already. And what it has done, it has given itself 200,000 more homework to be done, 200,000 tasks that it cannot, on top of the tasks it cannot complete at the moment. And this is not what I'm saying, it's what they have said. We know already that there is an audit taking place at Home Affairs, which has been conducted by independent advocates and attorneys. Some of them I know personally. Okay, and they have hired them because they acknowledge, and the minister himself has said, that there has been a breakdown within his own structures. Now, that is way before this ZEP debacle began on the 24th of November. So what the minister has done is made a difficult job even more difficult. The mainstream visas are not favorable to ZEP holders because what they really, what they're entitled to is permanent residency. Let's face it, they are here permanently. They're living here permanently. They're not living here temporarily. An individual does not live in a country for 15 years temporarily. We need to divorce ourselves from the idea that the individuals concerned are on a temporary visa. They were never on a temporary visa. The provision that provided for ZEP derives from elements or sections in the Immigration Act that provide for permanent residency. They were always in the country permanently, albeit permanently with conditions which limited their stay, but they've been in this country for far too long to be considered
right.
people in the country.
Yeah, Advocate Simba Chitando, I have to thank you for your time. Thanks very much indeed for giving us, I guess, that perspective. Something tells me this is a story that is far from over, and we'll watch it as it keeps developing. Advocate Simba is the legal counsel for the Zimbabwean Exemption Permit Holders Association. Once again, thanks very much indeed for your time.